On a quiet evening in a small town, an elderly woman was forced to her knees by two police officers, their authority unchecked and their cruelty on full display. The crowd watched in silence, unsure whether to intervene. But what no one knew was that this moment would ignite something far greater, a movement that would shake the very foundation of their town. How did this act of humiliation backfire? And who would have the courage to stand up when it mattered most? Stay tuned to find out. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The evening air in the small Midwestern town carried a crisp chill as Eleanor Carter tightened her coat around her shoulders. At 72, she had lived here her whole life, watched children grow, businesses open and close, and the town change in subtle ways. But one thing that hadn't changed was the way power operated, how those who had it could wield it against those who dared to speak out. Earlier that night, Eleanor had stood before the town council, her voice firm, despite the weight of years pressing on her. "This isn't about making trouble," she had told them, her hands gripping the wooden podium. "It's about fairness, about dignity. We have the right to walk our streets without fear." Her words had been met with a mix of nods, silence, and skeptical glances. She knew that not everyone in town saw the problem the way she did, but she also knew the truth. Too many people had whispered about police officers overstepping, about intimidation tactics used on those who dared to question authority. And now, she had put herself in the spotlight. As she made her way home, the quiet of the streets felt different tonight, heavy, watching. The distant hum of a patrol car idling made her heartbeat quicken. She told herself it was nothing, just another night in town. But deep down, she knew better. Some things never changed, and speaking up had always come with a price. Eleanor kept her pace steady as she walked down the dimly lit street, but her grip on her purse tightened. The distant sound of an engine humming made her uneasy. She glanced over her shoulder. A police cruiser was rolling slowly behind her, its headlights casting long shadows on the pavement. She exhaled sharply, straightened her back, and kept walking. Then, the siren gave a short burst, just enough to make her stop. "Ma'am," a voice called. Eleanor turned as Officer Travis Cole stepped out of the vehicle, his boots hitting the pavement with an air of authority. He was a broad man, his uniform neatly pressed, his belt heavy with the weight of his badge and gun. Behind him, his younger partner, Officer Daniel Ruiz, lingered by the car, his expression unreadable. "It's a bit late for a stroll, don't you think?" Cole said, his voice carrying an edge of condescension. "I've been walking these streets longer than you've been alive, officer," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. Cole smirked. "That's so. Well, you see, we got a report about some suspicious activity in the area. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Eleanor crossed her arms. "Suspicious? A woman walking home from a town meeting." "Depends on the woman," Cole shot back, stepping closer. "I heard you had a lot to say about us tonight." Ruiz shifted uncomfortably, casting a glance at his partner. "Maybe we should just let her go," he murmured. Cole ignored him. "How about we check your ID? Make sure everything's in order." Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she reached into her bag. She knew this game. She'd seen it before. As she handed over her ID, Cole barely glanced at it before letting out a chuckle. "Funny how people who act innocent always seem to get nervous," he said. "I'm not nervous," Eleanor said, holding his gaze. Cole's smirk faded slightly. "You should be," he muttered, before handing her ID back. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. Eleanor reached for her ID with slow, deliberate movements, her fingers barely brushing against the plastic card, before Cole yanked it back. "You in a hurry to leave, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with mock politeness. Eleanor squared her shoulders. "No, officer. But I'd like to get home. Unless I'm being charged with something, I assume I'm free to go." Cole let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "See? That's the problem these days. People think they can talk back, challenge authority, like it's a game." He took a step closer, invading her space. "Maybe you need a reminder of how things work around here." Officer Ruiz shifted beside him, his posture uneasy. "Come on, Cole. She's an old woman. Let's just—" Cole shot him a look that made him fall silent. Then, turning back to Eleanor, he suddenly grabbed her wrist. A gasp rippled through the small group of bystanders that had begun to gather a few feet away, drawn in by the commotion. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she refused to let fear take hold. "You need to show some respect," Cole said, tightening his grip just enough to send a message. "Maybe you ought to get down on your knees and apologize for wasting our time." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. A cold anger settled in her chest. She had spent a lifetime enduring moments like this, when power was wielded not for justice, but for humiliation. "I will do no such thing," she said, her voice unwavering. Cole's jaw twitched. The crowd had grown larger, their murmurs growing louder. Some held their phones up, recording. "You want to make this difficult?" Cole asked. Then another voice rang out, strong, clear. "Let her go." All eyes turned to a young woman stepping forward. Lena Thompson, a community organizer, stood tall, her expression fierce. "This is harassment," Lena said. "You know it, and we all see it." The murmurs in the crowd grew bolder. Ruiz cleared his throat. "Cole, maybe we should—" Cole hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. He scanned the crowd, suddenly aware of the eyes watching him. Eleanor saw it, that flicker of doubt, and she knew in that moment the tides were shifting. The tension in the air was thick, pressing down on everyone present. Eleanor could feel the weight of Cole's grip, still lingering on her wrist, but she refused to let it shake her. The crowd had grown, their murmurs swelling into something more, a collective sense of outrage. Lena Thompson took another step forward, her stance firm. "Let her go," she repeated, her voice carrying over the restless crowd. Cole turned his gaze toward her, sizing her up. "And who exactly do you think you are?" he sneered. Lena crossed her arms. "A citizen, just like her, just like everyone here who's watching you abuse your authority." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Someone called out, "We've got it all on camera." Another voice added, "This isn't right." Cole's smirk faltered, and Eleanor saw it again. That flicker of hesitation. He had power, yes, but he thrived on silence, on fear. And right now, the people weren't afraid anymore. Ruiz took a cautious step forward, his expression torn. "Cole," he said, his voice lower, firmer this time. "This isn't a good look for us." Cole shot him a glare, but Ruiz didn't back down. "She's done nothing wrong," Ruiz continued. "We should just walk away." Cole's fingers flexed at his side, his frustration clear. Oh, he was used to being in control. But this wasn't playing out the way he had expected. Eleanor met his gaze. "You don't scare me," she said quietly. But the strength in her voice carried. "You never did." More voices rose in the crowd, emboldened. "Yeah, let her go. This isn't how the law works." Cole clenched his jaw, scanning the faces around him. Too many people, too many cameras. His power was slipping. With a final irritated sigh, he took a step back. "Fine," he muttered. "Have it your way." The tension broke like a dam. Relief flooded through Eleanor, though she stood her ground, unwavering. Cole turned to Ruiz, his voice low with warning. This isn't over. But as the officers retreated, Eleanor knew. This was just the beginning. The people had spoken, and for the first time in a long time, someone had listened. Eleanor stood tall as the officers walked away, but she could still feel the heat of their glares on her back. Her body ached, not from the physical struggle, but from the weight of what had just happened. The crowd remained, lingering in the charged air, as if unsure whether to celebrate or brace for what would come next. Lena turned to Eleanor. Are you okay? She asked, her voice softer now, but still carrying the steel of defiance. Eleanor nodded, her hands still trembling slightly. I've been through worse, she said, but I'll be damned if I let it happen again. A young man in the crowd, Jacob, a boy who often visited the library where Eleanor had once worked, stepped forward, guilt plain on his face. Miss Carter, I should have said something sooner, he admitted. I saw what was happening, and I froze. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Fear is natural, she told him, but standing here now, that means something. The murmurs of the crowd turned into voices of action. People exchanged contact information. Plans were whispered. Someone suggested a meeting at the town hall. The next morning, videos of the confrontation flooded social media. Local news picked up the story, and within hours, pressure mounted against Officer Cole. By afternoon, the mayor's office issued a statement. An internal investigation had been opened. At the community center that evening, Eleanor, Lena, and others gathered. This isn't just about me, Eleanor told the group. It's about every person who's ever been silenced. We have a choice. We can let them sweep this under the rug, or we can make sure they hear us. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The fight wasn't over, but the first battle had been won. And this time, Eleanor wouldn't be standing alone. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. The town, once quiet and complacent, was now buzzing with conversation. The footage of Eleanor's confrontation had reached far beyond their small community, sparking outrage and support from people they had never met. At the next town council meeting, the room was packed. Eleanor sat at the front, flanked by Lena and Jacob. Officer Cole was notably absent, having been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Mayor Hughes cleared his throat. We acknowledge the concerns raised by the community, he said carefully. A formal review of Officer Cole's conduct is underway. Lena stood. That's not enough, she said. We don't want promises. We want accountability. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eleanor watched the council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. For the first time, they were facing a town that wasn't willing to sit quietly. When the meeting ended, people gathered around Eleanor, shaking her hand, thanking her. Even Officer Ruiz approached, hesitant but sincere. I should have done more, he admitted. Eleanor studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then do more now, she said simply. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Eleanor felt something shift, not just in the town, but in herself. The fight wasn't over, but the people were awake, and for the first time in a long time, she truly believed that change was coming. Eleanor's story is more than just an incident. It's a lesson in resilience, courage, and the power of community. It reminds us that injustice thrives in silence, but even a single voice can spark change. Standing up against abuse of power is never easy, but when people come together, they can hold those in authority accountable. One of the key takeaways from this story is the importance of not looking away. Many in the crowd that night felt fear, hesitation, or uncertainty. But it only took one person, Lena, to step forward and break the silence, giving others the courage to follow. This teaches us that when we see wrongdoing, we must ask ourselves, will I be a bystander or will I take action? Additionally, the story highlights the role of collective action. Eleanor alone could not have stopped Officer Cole, but with the support of her community, real consequences followed. In our own lives, whether facing discrimination, corruption, or injustice, we must remember that change happens when people unite. The next time we witness unfairness, big or small, let this story serve as a reminder. One voice can make a difference, but many voices together can change everything. What would you do in her place? Would you stand your ground and fight for what's right, even when the odds are against you? One. Or would you step back, avoiding confrontation to protect yourself from potential harm? 2. Leave a 1 or 2 in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your voice matters, and together, we can keep these important conversations going.